I would have thought Diddy would be throwing all his celebrity mates under the bus.
I mean, that could potentially be coming when it's time for court and when it's time for him to testify. But what we're seeing right now is how important public relations really are to Sean Combs. He's desperately trying to control the narrative behind bars, allowing his attorneys to do documentaries.
Today, in a New York federal courtroom, Sean Diddy Combs told the judge he was, quote, a little nervous. The rap mogul's criminal trial began this morning. He is trafficking, racketeering, and more.
The courtroom was electric with tension, and no, it wasn't just because of the high-profile nature of the trial. Sean Diddy Combs, once the indisputable titan of the music world, now found himself on the opposite side of the spotlight, facing allegations so scandalous they seemed ripped from a Hollywood thriller. But it wasn't just the charges that had people buzzing. It was the arrival of an unexpected player that sent shockwaves through the courtroom, and apparently through Diddy's composure. Ben Chew. Yes, that Ben Chew. The legal mastermind who helped Johnny Depp obliterate Amber Heard in a defamation trial that consumed global headlines. And now, here he was, parachuted into Diddy's trial not as an advocate, but as an expert on jury selection. The mere mention of his name had sent Diddy into a tailspin, and what unfolded next was nothing short of explosive.
The defense wanted to propose a question on, after the potential jurors filled out their questionnaire, have they seen any news media, any documentaries, anything just relating to a news medium, and whether or not they saw it in between them filling out the questionnaire to Monday morning when they saw, or when they go to jury selection. So essentially meaning...
Let's back up for a second. Imagine being Diddy, a man who, for decades, was synonymous with luxury, power, and untouchable success. He built an empire, a legacy and a mythos that made him larger than life. But now he's sitting behind a defense table, stripped of the glitz and glam, his graying hair and nervous demeanor worlds away from the man who once declared himself bad boy for life. And then in walks Ben Chew, an unrelenting symbol of courtroom dominance. It wasn't just an insult to injury. It was a calculated move that reeked of psychological warfare. The prosecution didn't just want to win. They wanted to dismantle him piece by piece, starting with his confidence. The tension snapped almost immediately. According to insiders, Diddy's reaction to Chew's involvement was nothing short of volcanic. Behind closed doors, sources claim he was pacing, shouting, and slamming his fist on the table. He allegedly accused the judge of stacking the deck against him, calling it a setup to make him look guilty before the trial even began. And can you blame him for panicking? Ben Chew's presence wasn't just a tactical move, it was a message. It was a reminder that this trial wasn't just about guilt or innocence. It was about spectacle, strategy, and control.
Which again, the judge kind of made this a point too, talking about, okay, well, if we're going to continue to do sidebars each and every single time that a prospective juror has to talk about a sensitive topic, that could take up a lot of time. But again, the defense and the government both seem pretty confident that they'll still be able to kind of get it going at a quick pace. This isn't unusual to do in these types of high profile cases. So that was pretty much just the topics about, Ghislaine Maxwell.
And let's not forget the stakes here. This wasn't some tabloid divorce drama or minor civil suit. No, this was a federal trial with allegations so harrowing they could obliterate not just Diddy's career, but his very identity. The prosecutors weren't playing around, and bringing in someone like Chew was proof they were pulling out all the stops. Chew's role may have been limited to jury selection, but his name alone carried weight. It signaled that the prosecution understood the game they were playing, and that they were playing to win. But here's where things get even more interesting. According to Courtroom Whispers, Diddy's legal team had no idea Chew would be involved until the very last minute. The judge's decision to consult him was allegedly kept under wraps, blindsiding the defense and throwing their carefully crafted strategy into chaos. One source close to Diddy's camp described the scene as pure pandemonium, with his attorneys scrambling to figure out how to counteract the psychological blow. And let's not underestimate how much of a blow it was. For a man like Diddy, who built his empire on controlling narratives, this was the ultimate loss of control in narratives. This was the ultimate loss of control. It wasn't just about the jury anymore. It was about the optics, the headlines, and the way this trial would be remembered.
That the defense kind of pointed out that they will be adding 2 defense attorneys. We only thought initially it was 1. But one thing that stood out to me when Mark Agnifilo was talking about this was he said that these defense attorneys are in the courtroom right now. I didn't see Mark Garagos in that courtroom, but what I did see is 2 defense attorneys that have been there when Brian Steele came on board, and those 2 defense attorneys.
And speaking of optics, let's talk about the jury selection process itself, which was already shaping up to be a battleground of its own. Over 600 potential jurors were summoned, each one grilled about their biases, media consumption, and personal opinions about Diddy. The goal? To find 12 people who could sit through weeks of graphic testimony and shocking evidence without letting their emotions cloud their judgment. But here's the catch. How do you find impartial jurors when the defendant is one of the most famous and polarizing figures in entertainment history? It's not just about finding people who haven't seen the infamous 2016 hotel video or read the damning headlines. It's about finding people who won't let those things sway them even if they have. And this is where Chu's expertise came into play. He wasn't just there to explain the mechanics of jury selection. He was there to shape the narrative. He talked about the psychology of jurors, the importance of body language, and the subtle ways biases can creep into decision-making. It was all incredibly technical, but make no mistake, it was also deeply personal. Chu knew that this trial would be won or lost in the jury box, and he wasn't about to let the defense get the upper hand.
Two women who said that they had been sexually abused, saying it happened decades ago, and they thought that they could look at the evidence in this case, which is about assault, and view it fair and unbiased based on what comes into the courtroom. And one woman who is proceeding said she was arrested when she was 16 for shoplifting at Harry Potter's World at Universal Studios. The judge asked her what she stole.
But if Chu's presence rattled Diddy, it downright enraged his legal team. Behind the scenes, they were livid, accusing the judge of overstepping and questioning the impartiality of the entire process. One insider described the mood in the defense camp as paranoid, with whispers of conspiracies and unfair treatment dominating their private conversations. And while it's easy to dismiss these reactions as desperation, there's no denying the psychological toll this trial is taking on everyone involved. And yet, the drama doesn't stop there. As the jury selection process dragged on, new revelations and controversies seemed to emerge daily. Potential jurors were dismissed for everything from liking a satirical Instagram post about the case to having tangential connections to the entertainment industry. One woman was excused after admitting she had watched a documentary about Diddy, while another was allowed to stay despite confessing she had seen the infamous hotel video. And then there were the jurors who had no qualms about speaking their minds. Some admitted outright that they didn't like Diddy and didn't think they could be impartial. Others said they were unsure if they could stomach the evidence they were about to hear.
The judge is hopeful that that could be concluded as soon as Wednesday, with opening statements in the case beginning next week and then the beginning of the evidence. So Combs has pleaded not guilty. He has said, his lawyers have said, that all of these allegations are the prosecutors trying to criminalize his sexual activity that they say was entirely consensual.
And let's not forget the wild card, the anonymous jury. In a case like this, where the stakes are sky high and the public scrutiny is relentless, protecting the identities of jurors is crucial. But it also adds another layer of intrigue and paranoia. Who are these people? What are their biases? And how will they react to the mountain of evidence and testimony that's about to be unleashed? It's a question that's keeping everyone on edge, from the defense team to the prosecutors to Diddy himself. And as the trial inches closer to opening arguments, one thing is clear. This isn't just a legal battle. It's a war for the narrative, the headlines, and the legacy of one of the most controversial figures in modern entertainment. And it's only just beginning.
Absolutely not surprising, because they want to get to a fair and impartial jury, and someone who has already formed an opinion, for example, is not going to be someone that the defense is going to want to move forward with, because you are supposed to listen to what the judge says in the four corners of the room.
And so the courtroom chess match deepened. With jury selection dragging on, the prosecution wasn't just building a case, they were building a spectacle. Every move felt like it was designed to poke at Diddy's carefully constructed image, to unravel the man who once seemed untouchable. And as the defense scrambled to regain footing, the cracks in their confidence were starting to show. But here's the thing, this trial wasn't just about what happened behind closed doors. It was about the power, the privilege, and the unspoken rules of an industry where influence often trumps accountability. And now, for the first time, it seemed like Diddy's fortress of fame might not be enough to shield him. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and the evidence the prosecution was preparing to unveil made that painfully clear. Among the most damning, reports of secret recordings allegedly seized during the dramatic raids on Diddy's properties. These weren't just any recordings either. Prosecutors claimed they revealed a pattern, a system even of control and coercion that spanned years. The tapes, if authenticated, could paint a picture of someone who didn't just dabble in questionable behavior, but orchestrated it with chilling precision. And let's not forget the infamous hotel surveillance footage already looming over this case. If the prosecution could tie it all together, the narrative they presented to the jury would be devastating.
In her civil lawsuit, Cassie said that she was the victim of abuse, assault, and at the hands of Diddy.
But there's another layer to all this, one that makes the allegations even murkier. Diddy has been battling legal claims on multiple fronts, each one peeling back a different corner of his carefully guarded life. Remember the lawsuit filed by a former yacht crew member who claimed she was assaulted while working on a chartered trip for Diddy's family? That case, which surfaced earlier this year, described a scene so chaotic it sounded more like a Hollywood thriller than a luxurious getaway. The plaintiff alleged that she was not only mistreated, but also forced into situations that were wildly inappropriate for her role. And while Diddy's team has vehemently denied these accusations, the story had already done its damage, adding yet another stain to his crumbling reputation. And then there's the case of Dawn Richard, a former Danity Kane member whose allegations against Diddy date back years. Richard didn't just accuse him of mistreatment. She claimed she witnessed firsthand the kind of behavior that prosecutors are now using to build their case. She described incidents where Diddy allegedly lashed out, taking his anger to extremes that left those around him walking on eggshells. Her testimony, though tied to a civil suit, could be critical in shaping public perception. Because, let's face it, when former collaborators, people who were once part of your inner circle, start turning against you, it speaks volumes.
This investigation is ongoing, and I encourage anyone with information about this case to come forward and to do it quickly.
Another lawsuit that shook the public came from Roddy Jones, a former videographer who worked closely with Diddy during the height of his career. Jones claimed he was dragged into a world he never signed up for, alleging that he was coerced into filming events that he described as deeply unsettling. According to Jones, this wasn't just a one-off. It was a pattern, a way of life for the mogul and his entourage. He even claimed to have recordings of his own that could substantiate his allegations, though whether these tapes will ever see the light of day remains uncertain. Still, the mere mention of them added yet another layer of intrigue and potential evidence to this already sprawling saga. Let's not forget the bombshell accusations from Joey Dickerson Neal, who claimed that Diddy's behavior stretched back decades, all the way to the early 90s. Her lawsuit painted a picture of a younger but no less aggressive Diddy, someone who allegedly used his influence to silence those who crossed him. What made this case particularly shocking was the timeline. This wasn't just behavior that developed over time. If the allegations are to be believed, this was who he was from the start. And that raises an uncomfortable question. How many people looked the other way over the years, choosing to protect a star instead of his alleged victims?
You said we are not done and that Combs did not do this alone. Do you foresee that there could be other charges related to this case?
I'm not taking anything off the table.
And then there's the chilling connection to Cassandra Ventura's explosive lawsuit from last year. While her case was settled almost immediately, it acted as a catalyst for the tidal wave of claims that followed. Ventura's allegations weren't just about personal harm. They hinted at a broader, more systemic pattern. And though her settlement means her voice won't be heard in this trial, the echoes of her story are everywhere. From the alleged recordings to the claims of coercion, it's as if her case laid the groundwork for everything that's happening now. The prosecution may not be able to use her directly, but her presence is impossible to ignore. But the defense wasn't going down without a fight. Behind the scenes, Diddy's legal team was reportedly working overtime to discredit not just the evidence, but the motivations of everyone involved. They were digging into the backgrounds of witnesses, questioning the integrity of the investigation, and even suggesting that the allegations were part of a coordinated effort to bring down a successful black man. It was a strategy designed to sow doubt, to muddy the waters just enough to make jurors hesitate. After all, in a case like this, reasonable doubt could be their only lifeline.
The actual juror. I do want to mention one other quick thing. They can't find witness number 3 still. This is apparently an ex-girlfriend of Diddy's who was one of the alleged victims. And prosecution can't.
And then there was the issue of the missing witness, victim 3, as she was referred to in court documents. Her sudden disappearance wasn't just a logistical headache for the prosecution. It was a goldmine for the defense. They wasted no time spinning her absence into a narrative of its own, implying that the government's case was weaker than it appeared. But let's be real. The idea that someone might disappear under these circumstances wasn't exactly shocking. The pressure, the scrutiny, the fear of retaliation, it all added up to an environment where staying silent could feel like the safest option, and that in and of itself spoke volumes. Meanwhile, Diddy's demeanor in court was becoming a story of its own. On the surface, he was composed, even polite, apologizing to the judge, nodding to his lawyers, and maintaining a calm exterior. But those who observed him closely said the cracks were there. The nervous glances, the fidgeting, the moments when he seemed lost in thought. It all hinted at a man who was struggling to keep it together. And who could blame him? This wasn't just a trial. It was a dismantling. Every piece of evidence, every witness, every headline chipped away at the persona he'd spent decades building.
Find her.
Right. Her attorney is trying to find her, and her attorney has said that she may not be willing to come and testify anyway. So
be interesting. Okay, we're moving on.
And let's talk about the headlines because they were relentless. Every day, new details emerged, each more sensational than the last. From allegations of secret deals to whispers of celebrity witnesses, the media was in a feeding frenzy. And Diddy, once the master of controlling his own narrative, found himself powerless to stop it. Even his apology for the now infamous hotel video, framed as a moment of accountability, was dissected and criticized as too little, too late. The court of public opinion had already made up its mind, and it wasn't in his favor. But here's the question that nobody seemed to be asking. Why now? Why, after years of rumors and whispers, was all of this coming to light? Some pointed to the cultural shift, the growing willingness to hold powerful men accountable. Others suggested that Diddy's own hubris had finally caught up with him, that he'd pushed too far for too long and left too many enemies in his wake. Whatever the reason, one thing was clear: this was more than just a trial. It was a reckoning.
The judge didn't go into not really the judge, the government didn't go into too many details about the extent of the plea offer, but one thing that they had said was pretty much that under the plea offer, he would be facing less time than he's facing if he would have gone to trial. So when the allocution portion came, Diddy stood up. The judge kind of read him everything that he had needed to read to him, just about whether or not he was of sound mind.
As the prosecution prepared to present its opening arguments, the tension in the courtroom was palpable. Jurors sat stone-faced, their expressions giving nothing away. Diddy's legal team huddled together, whispering urgently. And Diddy himself. He stared straight ahead, his face a mask of determination. Or was it fear? It was impossible to say, but one thing was certain: the battle was just beginning. So here's where we leave it, for now. The evidence is mounting, the stakes are skyrocketing, and the courtroom drama is far from over. But what do you think? Is this a long overdue moment of accountability, or is there more to this story than meets the eye? Let us know your thoughts down below, and trust us, you're going to want to stick around for what comes next. See you in the next one.